The Pantsir-SM detects an aircraft-sized target 40 kilometers out, roughly 25 miles, and can shoot one down as far out as 20. Russia has stationed several hundred of them around its most valuable targets. Each one carries 2 rapid-fire 30mm cannons and up to 12 guided missiles on a single truck, priced by most outside estimates at $12 to $15 million a unit. Set against that, a Ukrainian first-person view drone, an FPV built for around $400. On paper, this is not a contest. In practice, Oryx, the open-source project that only logs visually confirmed wreckage, counts at least 35 destroyed Pantsir systems since the full-scale invasion, several killed by exactly the kind of small, slow, cheap machine this system was never designed to notice. So why does a system rated to kill an aircraft 20 kilometers away keep missing the easiest target it will ever face? The Pantsir-SM is a gun-missile hybrid, mounted on a single-wheeled truck, meant to sit inside the last defensive ring around something Russia cannot afford to lose: an airbase, a command post, a refinery, or one of the longer-range S-400 batteries that need something smaller and faster reacting to guard their own blind spots. It was designed by the KBP Instrument Design Bureau in Tula, with development running through the 1990s, partly funded by early export interest from the United Arab Emirates, and it entered Russian service around 2012, decades after the concept was first drawn up. The vehicle carries 2 30mm autocannons for close-in, fast-reacting fire, backed by up to 12 guided missiles rated to reach out to 20 kilometers and as high as 15 kilometers against manned aircraft, tighter against smaller, faster threats like cruise missiles and precision bombs. A single radar and optical tracking system mounted on the same vehicle is meant to detect a target, hand it to a missile or the cannons, then do the same for whatever comes next. That is the sales pitch. One vehicle carrying layered weapons, quick enough to catch what slips past the bigger systems behind it. The unit cost most often quoted $12 to $15 million, traces back to United Arab Emirates export pricing from the early 2000s, when the UAE became the system's first foreign buyer. No Russian manufacturer publishes a retail price, so every figure in circulation, including this one, is an outside estimate built from export deals and battlefield damage assessments rather than an invoice. It is used here as the best sourced range available, not a settled number. Russia has fielded several hundred Pantsir-SM systems since it entered service, spread across air defense regiments protecting air bases, naval facilities, and critical infrastructure, with additional export customers including the United Arab Emirates, Syria, Algeria, and Iraq. For most of this system's life, that pitch made sense because it was built against a specific kind of threat, something with a jet engine or a rocket motor, moving fast, showing up clearly on radar, and expensive enough that Russia only had to worry about a handful arriving at once. Nobody who designed the Pantsir was thinking about a machine that costs less than a used motorcycle and can be launched by the 100 from a pickup truck. That machine did not really exist in numbers worth planning for until Ukraine's drone war made it the single most common airborne threat over Russian-held and Russian territory alike. One truck missing one drone is a small story on its own. The bigger question is whether the air defense systems drawn up in that era, tuned for targets that were fast and expensive, have any real answer to targets that are slow and disposable, or whether the same weakness sits in the radar of every one of them, waiting for someone to send enough cheap drones to find it. Detection breaks first, and nothing further along the chain works without it. A Pantsir's radar is tuned to find and track something with a real radar signature, an aircraft-sized metal airframe, a missile body, something that reflects a usable amount of energy back to the receiver. A small FPV drone or a Ukrainian long-range strike drone in the Lyuty or Boba class, built around a thin composite or plastic airframe with very little metal in it, reflects almost nothing by comparison. A widely cited Russian technical assessment of the country's own short-range air defense radars, examined by Western defense journalists, concluded that against small drones, detection range collapses to somewhere around 3 to 4 kilometers, only a few kilometers past the missile's own stated minimum range of about 1.5 kilometers. In practice, that leaves the crew only a handful of seconds between first detection and impact, nowhere near the reaction time the system was designed around. The same assessment goes further and says the tracking system struggles to hold a stable lock on something that small once it is found, producing real aiming error even when a missile does get fired, and that the vehicle's infrared channel is close to useless here. A tiny propeller-driven airframe simply does not put out enough heat to register cleanly against the sky or the ground behind it. So two of the system's three ways of finding a target, radar and infrared, are both weak against this specific size of threat, and the third, the human operator's own eyes through an optical sight, only works once the drone is close enough that there is little time left to react. It is the equivalent of building a security camera that reads license plates perfectly at 100 meters and then asking it to spot a moth on the porch light. The twin 30mm cannons are supposed to be the backup once a target is too close or too cheap to spend a missile on. That backup has its own arithmetic problem. A companion Russian short-range system of the same generation, the Tunguska, needs an estimated 4,000 to 13,000 rounds of cannon fire to reach even a 50% chance of hitting a small drone at 3 kilometers, according to that same technical assessment, a number well beyond the roughly 700 rounds a Pantsir carries, or even the nearly 1,900 rounds loaded onto a Tunguska. That shortfall is the difference between carrying one magazine and needing 10 of them. The gun works exactly as designed, and the crew can fire off every round the vehicle holds without ever reaching the odds this particular fight demands. Altitude compounds the problem. Russia's own published performance figures already describe the Pantsir-SM as most effective only up to around 5 kilometers of range and altitude against low, slow, radar-quiet targets, well short of its advertised reach against faster threats. A Ukrainian long-range strike drone typically cruises at low altitude, and an FPV drone can be flown at treetop height. Both sit inside a zone where ground clutter, the radar return bouncing back off hills and buildings, buries a small, slow signal well inside the envelope the published figures say the system covers. The manufacturer claims a newer radar fitted to an upgraded version, the Pantsir-SM, roughly doubles the usable detection range compared with the baseline system. That number comes from the manufacturer and Russian state-adjacent reporting, not an independent test, so it stays labeled as a claim rather than a demonstrated result. Even taken at face value, doubling a detection range that starts at 3 to 4 kilometers against a small drone still leaves very little time between first detection and the target arriving. Then there is the swarm problem, and Russia's own engineering choices point straight at it. A single Pantsir-SM can only track and engage a small number of targets at once, generally described as 1 or 2 in the technical literature on this generation of system. while a single raid can put multiple drones over the same stretch of sky within minutes of each other. Russia's newest publicly marketed Pantsir upgrade advertises 4 simultaneous engagement channels instead of 1 or 2, and the manufacturer has repacked a separate new interceptor round into smaller, cheaper missiles, specifically so each launcher can carry roughly 4 times its old missile count. Neither change would exist if the older math had been working. To be clear about what is not confirmed, no independently sourced public reporting documents Ukraine successfully jamming or spoofing a Pantsir's own radar or targeting system directly, so that specific failure mode stays out of this account even though it would fit the pattern. The hardest number to argue with is the count of destroyed vehicles that someone actually photographed or filmed. Oryx counts at least 35 Pantsir systems destroyed since Russia's full-scale invasion, as of late 2025, discarding anything it cannot verify from an image. That is a flaw, not a ceiling, since a destroyed vehicle with no surviving photo or video never enters the count at all. Ukraine's SBU, its domestic security service, has claimed a far larger figure, roughly 48% of Russia's entire Pantsir fleet destroyed since the start of 2025 alone, worth an estimated $4 billion, against a Russian production rate the same officials put at only around 30 new units a year. At $12 to $15 million a unit, that $4 billion implies somewhere around 270 to 330 systems destroyed in under a year, 7 to 9 times Oryx's confirmed floor of 35. That gap is what an interested party's own count looks like, beside an independently verified one, a hard floor built only from footage anyone can go and look at, against a much larger figure claimed by the side doing the destroying. A handful of specific sourced incidents show how it happens. Ukraine's military and defense press reported a January 2025 strike in Kherson region, in which Ukraine launched a first-person view drone from a naval surface drone already at sea, destroying 2 Pantsir systems and a separate short-range air defense vehicle in a single engagement, a combination widely described at the time as the first publicly documented case of a sea drone used purely as a launch platform to get a small aerial drone within range of a land target. Coverage of the repeated raids against Crimea describes Ukrainian forces striking Pantsir units that were guarding radar sites and airfields there, though at least one specific claimed strike on 3 systems in a single raid could not be independently confirmed by the outlet that covered it, so it stays labeled here as claimed, not confirmed. One of the more notable admissions came from Russia's own side. In reporting on a strike near Belgorod, Russian sources themselves acknowledged the loss of a Pantsir there, a stronger data point than almost any Ukrainian claim, since it removes the incentive to exaggerate. At Kalino airfield in Kursk region, a separate raid destroyed a Pantsir alongside a Russian fighter jet, with the combined equipment value put by Ukrainian aligned outlets at roughly $45 million for that single night, a Ukrainian-sourced estimate rather than an audited figure, even where the underlying strike itself is well reported. Anyone who wants the next system pulled apart this same way, mechanism first, every figure sourced on screen, can subscribe. The math behind these losses deserves more than one headline ratio, using the lower end of the $12 to $15 million estimate against a $400 FPV drone. The exchange works out to somewhere around $30,000 of Russian hardware lost for every single dollar the drone that killed it cost to build. A rough calculation built from contested public estimates rather than one audited figure, and still one-sided by orders of magnitude at the most conservative end of it. Measured instead against a Ukrainian long-range strike drone priced nearer $50,000, the same $12 to $15 million range brings the ratio down to somewhere around $200 to $300 of Pantsir for every dollar of drone. Still a lopsided trade in the drone's favor. The strongest evidence that Russia knows it has a problem comes from a third party rather than from Kyiv. Assessments from the Institute for the Study of War describe Pantsir units being pulled back from frontline positions to help defend targets around Moscow, including at least one refinery, and note satellite and ground imagery showing some launchers carrying only a partial missile load on one side of the vehicle, which the Institute's analysts read as a possible sign of interceptor missile shortages rather than a deliberate tactic. A system does not get redeployed to guard the capital and does not roll out half-loaded if it is comfortably winning its fight at the front. Russia's own upgrade programs, the doubled-range radar and the anti-swarm missile repack, are the manufacturer's answer to the same pressure this institute is independently tracking from the outside. The same detection weakness has run in the opposite direction, with far worse consequences. In December 2024, Azerbaijan Airlines Flight 8243 was struck by Russian air defense fire near Grozny and crashed near Aktau in Kazakhstan, killing 38 of the 67 people aboard, while air defense crews in the area were actively engaging a Ukrainian drone raid nearby. Vladimir Putin has since publicly acknowledged that Russian air defense missiles detonated near the aircraft and apologized for the incident occurring in Russian airspace, without stating which specific system fired. That detail remains sourced to leaked findings from Russian investigators rather than an independent international inquiry, so the exact vehicle involved is reported, not confirmed. Crews equipped and trained for small, radar-quiet threats read a large, ordinary aircraft as one of them under the pressure of an active drone raid. The missed drone and the downed airliner are two outcomes of one weakness, sitting in the same part of the same system, separated only by which way the mistake happened to fall that night. The Pantsir's drone problem is not the Pantsir's alone. Its radar was tuned for a minimum target size, its missiles were priced for a minimum target value, and its ammunition load was sized for the number of threats anyone expected to arrive in one engagement. Ukraine then built a weapon that sits under every one of those thresholds at once and sent it in quantities nobody had planned around. Nothing on the vehicle is broken. The radar, the missiles, and the cannons all perform to specification, and every one of them was calibrated for a different war than the one now being fought over them. The open question from here is whether Russia's newer, more expensive Pantsir variants, with their extra engagement channels and repacked anti-swarm missiles, actually close this gap in the field. They may simply redo the same math with slightly better numbers, while the drones keep getting cheaper, faster than the interceptors do. The redeployment pattern is the other thing to track. If more of these systems keep moving toward Moscow and away from the front, that movement says more about how the fight is actually going than any claimed kill total does. So does the distance between Oryx's confirmed floor and the SBU's much larger claimed total. Because how far those two numbers drift apart over time measures how much of this war can still be checked from the outside. None of this makes the Pantsir a failure as a piece of engineering. It was built to solve a real problem, and against the threats it was designed for, it mostly still does. The lesson is a narrower one. A $400 weapon can force an expensive, capable system to fight outside the envelope it was ever built for, and no amount of added armor or extra ammunition fixes a detection problem sitting in the radar itself. The next video in this series takes the opposite angle, what the view looks like from inside the crew cabin and the control van. On the night, one of these systems has to decide, in real time, what is actually coming at it.